Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I'm here with John Chancellor from Teach the Soul. John had something to talk about. He's written a book.
Words to Live and Work By.
And we're going to go over a couple of things that he's isolated from time immemorial and talk about how it applies to managing your cravings and dealing with overeating. Hey, John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And you?
I'm doing great. I understand that you have another quote for us to talk about.
Yes, I do. And this one, I have two different titles to it. One is a Little League baseball game, or maybe a better title is Be Careful Who You Listen to. So I want to explain that. And I'm going to start with a quote from John Wooden, who was the extremely successful, considered the most successful college basketball coach ever. The best way to improve your team is to improve yourself. As a youngster, like most youngsters in my time, I played Little League baseball. So I don't remember how many runs I scored, and thank goodness I've forgotten all the errors I made. But I do remember one game and the lessons I should have learned from that game. I'm grateful that I'm able now to look back on them and learn the lesson in retrospect and share it with you. So in case you don't have firsthand experience with Little League baseball, the pitching is often more developed than the hitting and fielding. So if one team had a good pitcher, they were much more likely to win. And if they had a good pitcher, you did everything you could to distract him. So in one game, the one game I remember well, we were getting beat pretty soundly because the opposing team had one of the better pitchers in the league. And there were three things I remember about him. One, he was a very good pitcher. Two, he wore hearing aids. And the third thing I remember is he wore very thick glasses. This was long before you had the very lightweight lenses. He had what we used to call Coke bottle lenses. If you remember the old Coke bottles, the bottom of the bottle was very thick, and we jokingly called Coke bottle lenses. But he was very good, and our team was getting beaten rather soundly. So we started yelling insults at the pitcher. And as teenagers, we were able to get pretty creative with the insults we yelled.
I can't imagine you insulting anybody, by the way.
Well, you have to remember that I was young, and peer pressure has a pretty strong influence on you at the time.
Got it.
But we were starting to get under his skin a wee bit, and we started scoring a couple of runs. We got a couple of hits before he finally got us out in the ending. So here's the first lesson I want to share with you. Our coach did a very poor job of coaching us as teenagers. Instead of focusing on winning that game, winning by any means, trying to rattle the pitcher, he should have focused on the long term and having us worry about improving ourselves rather than trying to distract or take the pitcher down. This is a very important lesson. We tend to look around at others and maybe judge them, because if we can find fault with others, then our own personal shortcomings are not nearly as egregious. So the lesson here is, I think, pretty profound. Focus on yourself. Don't worry about others, what others are doing. Just focus on yourself. Focus on what you can do in your own life to improve yourself. Don't worry about everybody around you. So back to the game and the second lesson I learned. We were feeling a bit optimistic about the game, and so the next time that we were at bat and they were in the field, we resumed our needling of the pitcher, but it didn't seem to have any effect. The previous inning, we had gotten him rattled a bit, and we were making a comeback, but then when we were at bat again and he was pitching again, he seemed to be back to his old normal self, and we were not able to get under his skin. Finally, the game was over, and they beat us pretty badly. After the game was over, the other coach came over to our coach and said, I told him to turn off his hearing aid. I think that's a lesson for all of us. Now, I realize that most of us don't actually wear hearing aids, but I do think we often are influenced by conversations that other people have, and there's some people we simply don't need to listen to. We shouldn't listen to. We need to turn off our hearing aids so that we don't hear all the criticism. If you're trying to change your life, trying to make changes in your life, there will be plenty of people that will tell you why it won't work, what you're doing wrong, how you should be doing it. My suggestion is turn off your hearing aid.
I love it. That is right on point for the dialogue we have, the internal dialogue about should we or shouldn't we indulge a craving when we previously set a rule that would prevent us from doing that. So if you say, I'll never have bagels again, for example, and there's this little voice in your head that says, oh, you worked out really hard, you could afford the calories, bagels are not such a big deal, it's really a wonderful thing. You know, there are a series of things that you can and should do with that voice eventually so that it quiets down entirely. For example, you can logically refute it by saying, well, it's really white flour and gluten, and I have an inflammatory response to that, and my triglycerides don't really tolerate that kind of thing, and I've got high blood pressure, and this is a salt bagel, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can disempower the logic of it so that the justification no longer seems to make sense, and that helps. And you can also attend to regulating yourself better to keep yourself well nourished on a regular basis and make sure you're getting enough sleep and have enough social contact and that kind of thing. And that eliminates the organismic distress, which starts the craving for the bagel in the first place. But a lot of times it's just too much to do all that. A lot of times we don't have the wherewithal, and that inner voice sounds so loud that you don't really have the strength and fortitude and persistence to logically refute it and figure out how to take better care of yourself and, self-regulate and do all those wonderful things. So sometimes the best thing you can do is just turn off your hearing aid. Sometimes you can just turn away from it and say, well, I can't remember exactly why that's wrong, but I know it's wrong. I can't remember exactly how to refute those ideas, but I know I can refute them when I'm in a better state of mind. So I'm just not going to listen. And it's enough that I recognize that it's a destructive voice. It's enough that I remember that at a time when I was of sound mind and body, and I had the fortitude and good thought to sit down and make this plan and make this rule for myself, that was my higher self making my best plans. And I'm not going to break that. Even if I can't figure out why, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to turn off my hearing aids. So I think that's a very apropos metaphor.
While the lesson was not to listen to others, to turn off your hearing aid for others, I think that your point is extremely valid, that the most dangerous voice that we have to be on guard against is the one in our head. And that's the one that we really have to turn off our hearing aid, because it tells us things that we would not listen to anybody else. We listen to the voice in our head and pay attention to it, where we would not listen to anybody else. We would not let anybody else tell us some things that the voice in our head does. I like what you said about it. Just don't listen to it. Turn off your hearing aid.
It's like the devil and the angel on your shoulder. Sometimes you just don't let the dialogue take place. Listen to the angel and don't let the devil talk.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.